But now let's go to Stan in the radio booth once again. Stan.
Thanks, Ann. We're back with Chris Gaal, Monroe County Prosecutor. I want to get to one more challenge and then hopefully some solutions before our time runs out. It occurs to me that in a place like Bloomington, where there are a lot of people who are in same-sex relationships, that has a different impact on the domestic violence situation than does a place where there are a lot more traditional relationships. Is that the case, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because under the domestic violence statute, it talks about domestic violence being recognized between couples who are married, have a child in common, or who are living together as if married. Obviously, same-sex marriage is not recognized in the law in the state of Indiana. However, you know, in terms of prosecutorial discretion, living together as if married, we have deemed to be covered under the domestic relationship statute. So our policy in Monroe County is to recognize domestic violence in those same-sex couples.
So let's talk a little bit about solutions and hopefully prevention. There are a number of things that are going on in the county right now to help prevent domestic violence and help inform people about the problem and about ways to combat it, are there not?
Yes, there are, and you know, these are problems, domestic violence, sexual assault, these are community problems that require a community solution. It requires us organizing the resources of our community to address these things, not just within the law enforcement community, but also with organizations like Middle Way and other organizations in the community. We've cooperated on a number of efforts, public education and prevention efforts, the Respect campaign, you know, live it, teach it, the Real Men Don't Use Violence campaign, which was a poster with men from the community, me holding my new baby 18 days into my new administration as prosecutor. And our current project is outreach to the Latino community, where we're publishing information, our victims assistance brochure in Spanish, and we have a poster with recognizable leaders from the Spanish-speaking community talking about that domestic violence is also a problem in our community. Don't be afraid to report it. Our interest is in your safety, not your immigration status. If you call 911, we'll speak to you in Spanish. So these are really community organizing efforts and working towards a community solution.
So in just our last few seconds, what's the next step to help control this problem and in fact bring it down to as low as we can get it so we're not seeing as much domestic violence?
Obviously continuing the community response. One of the most significant things that's happened is now we've implemented a 24-hour cooling off period after a domestic violence arrest. That allows the victim to engage in safety planning, to think about how they can relocate, take advantage of services, and obviously, you know, to de-escalate the potential for violence. One of the first things that a defendant does when he's released from jail is often attempt to contact the victim, which can be, you know, very traumatic and intimidating for the victim. The fact that we've got a 24-hour cooling off period is extremely helpful in deterring that kind of violent interaction. We now have our domestic violence cases consolidated before one judge. We have one dedicated domestic violence prosecutor who handles those cases full-time, a dedicated victim assistant who works with domestic violence cases. All of that means better outcomes in those cases. The fact that there's one judge means that there's better supervision if someone violates a term of their release, violates their bond, harasses the victim, that can be responded to immediately.
Chris Gaal is the Monroe County Prosecutor. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks a lot, Stan and Chris. And going along with what Chris was saying, we actually do have a question from a viewer in Bloomington. He asked, or she asked, what about prevention? How can we help couples learn to have successful marriages? Specifically, how can we help teach relationship communication skills, and whose role should that be? So, Toby, you want to tackle that one?
I think that attitudes about relationships and how we communicate are at the core of addressing this problem, and those form very, very early in life. And so the sooner you can start talking to children about those things, the better you'll be. You know, there should be programs in elementary schools. Middle Way House runs programs in middle schools and high schools that we would love to expand. And those programs are called Building Healthy Relationships. And I think that's the way you do it. Too often, by the time a couple is already engaged in that cycle of violence, and you know, they have the attitudes that make it possible to hurt somebody, it's not a great time to go in and try to change the way they communicate, because it's not really about communication. It's about power and control, and you only really have to change the one person to get that done.
Viola, let's expand on that and that cycle of violence and what you saw from the judge's bench. I mean, is it too late at the point that they're in front of you or you're dealing with the situation?
Well, that depends on the individuals. But I need to say something that really bothers me. We must focus on women or people who are abused and the need for resources and shelter. We need to spend a considerable amount of time focusing on the abuser, because that person hangs around and waits for the lady to come out of the shelter. That is the person who much of the time has convinced this person that she is worthless, no one loves her but him, and he will try very hard to get her back and tell her that he loves her. So we need to make it clear that as important as it is to give shelter to people, it's more important for people not to be abusers.
And how do we do that?
Well, we have to have the same kind of community campaign that we're having now. Young men need to understand at an early age that you don't fight and beat up people, not even people who are your own size, but you certainly don't take advantage of someone in that kind of relationship. Where when I listened to Miss Smith, she was shocked that the person she loved did that to her. So that should never happen, because before he gets into that relationship, he should know it. One of the other things I'm thinking about is this. When we have women who file protection orders and they are not in the shelter, sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. I think it's very important if we could get counseling to them at that point or have it available to them. It may be, but I think in every case, every time one is filed, maybe that's the earliest intervention the court could have. So I just think we need to be honest about it, open about it. Toby has done a great job. So has she.
Linda, yeah.
We're doing everything, but are we doing everything we can do? Is there something else that needs to be done that we are not doing?
Linda, answering that question, is there something else we need to do?
I think you've brought up a very, very good point, and that is so often it offends me when we always say, why doesn't she leave? And it focuses on the person who is the victim, and we seldom hear people say, why does he batter? So here in Indiana, we have what we call the Batters Intervention Program, and we have certification standards that these are things that we have decided are minimum for batters intervention programs, and this is to hold the perpetrator accountable. So we are wanting our programs in Indiana to get certification so that it says they are being held accountable and they are helping the victim at the same time. While he's under supervision of a batterers program, she's also hooking up with an advocate, and the advocate can help her with a safety plan and looking at her choices. And we always say we never ever tell a victim to leave. That's extremely dangerous. Okay. We want that victim to make her own choices, but we want to have the opportunity and the resources available when she does.
Great job. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for joining us. And of course, our group of experts, you were fantastic. Stan, thanks for your help tonight as well.
Thank you, Ann. It's good to be with you.
Post your question for next month at infocus@indiana.edu, or if you would like to participate in a blog, leave a comment, or see portions of this show, please visit our website, indianapublicmedia.org/infocus. Next month, we will discuss various traditions and commonalities of religion on the next In Focus. Have a great night.
Production support for In Focus is provided by Smithville, a locally owned business serving central and southern Indiana since 1922, with residential and business internet, voice, and security services. Smithville, local pride, global technology. Information at smithville.net. And by viewers like you. Thank you.